Welcome to the Live Wildly podcast, a space where we explore how to live our wildest expressions while nourishing our hearts. Here we come together to share about our life paths, authentic expressions, and heart's wisdom with one another. We cover all things motherhood, spirituality, adventure, health and wellness, and more. I'm your host, Olivia Ashley, a mama, intuitive, and seeker of a joyful, inspired life. Let's dare to live wildly together. Welcome to another episode of Live Wildly podcast. I'm so happy you're here, and this episode is a goodie. This is the first male guest that I've had, not the last, and I am just sincerely delighted to be bringing you this story and connecting you to this amazing, strong human, Kyle Griffin. And Kyle is here to share his story of loss, tragedy, survival, and the ultimate empowerment that he found through it all. He's a native to Colorado, and he had a life experience that forever changed him. And while faced with darkness and tragedy, he found light and positivity through it all. He's here to share his story today of a near-death experience, of literally dying multiple times, having his heart stopped after a freak electrocution as a young 25-year-old, and the just wild everything that went down, and just the wild happenings from being electrocuted to his heart stopping to just, I think, the synchronicities of sorts of having a paramedic driving down the road right as this has happened, and his survival through the pain, through not recognizing hhis physical appearance, and just the unsureness, the loneliness, the confusion that came with all of that, and not to mention the physical and mental toll that this took on him. And yet I sit with him now, 20 some years later, and am just in awe of his attitude, his positivity, his inspiration, his willingness to answer questions, to help others who have a physical disability or difference, who've been through a tragedy, a trauma, a big life experience that have really shaken someone, and yet being able to help them understand that here's how I lived with it, here's how I can help you live with it or help give perspective. And again, it just is so incredible. And I don't want to give too much of his story away, because that is really the depth of the episode today, is walking through who he was before, leading us to what happened, to his experience, and then asking different questions around, both what happened the day of, his experience of it, how he managed the pain, what his support systems were like, and how he got to a place of true positivity and a space of willingness to share and use his story for good. And also feeling like he went on to just live his life, that it wasn't in the news, it wasn't something that was publicized or anything. And he's gone on to do talks at med schools and with children. And I really think he's just at the start of this journey of sharing his story and where he's going to go with this, because it was so impactful for me just to listen, and I think it will be for all of you. But I think this is going to open many doors for him, or I hope it does, of deciding what he wants to do now in his life with this story. So I am so delighted to share. Again, we're going to cover near-death experience, what it felt like to die, what it felt like to go through so much pain, live through it, the physical, mental, emotional ramifications of going through something like this, and just his overall perseverance. And I did want to touch on a few things that were not covered in the episode, because we wrapped up this conversation and then continued to talk for another hour. And there were so many more things that I think are going to be super, super helpful. So to let you know and not ruin the story or anything, but what Kyle was left with was disabilities in his hand and physical disfigurement of his hands. So he's missing multiple fingers and had to completely relearn and deals with a lot of nerve pain and damage from it. And one of the things that I didn't ask, but I asked later, was around what did he think really helped him get through this time? And he brought up prayer. And I wasn't expecting that, but he really believed in the power of prayer, that group prayer really has an ability to help heal, to help direct healing energy. He is a Reiki level 1, which is so cool to me, and I loved it. And that was actually the one thing he said has helped him with his nerve pain. And he said he's tried everything. He knew he couldn't live a life of heavy painkillers, that was not going to work for him long term. And so he really said he's tried everything under the sun, from acupuncture, acupressure, herbal remedies, Reiki, tons of different things. And he said he's completely open if anyone has suggestions from listening to his story, who has dealt with nerve pain and found solutions from it. Please reach out to me and I can connect Kyle to the information, because he is so open and still deals with that today. But he said Reiki has been the number one thing that has helped him both heal. He can feel his hands getting warm, that there's healing happening when he is giving himself Reiki or giving others Reiki, and then also just helps with the pain. So I thought that was incredible, because I didn't expect to hear that from somebody. I didn't know Kyle going into this. This was a brand new conversation, which was amazing, and we've deeply connected. And so hearing just how open he was to everything, and he attributed that to this near-death experience, and it really did change and shift some of his beliefs and priorities a little bit. But back to the prayer, that when he had his accident, his grandma's local church had created a big prayer group and wrote all these prayers down on this board, and they hung it up in his hospital, and they were consistently praying for him. And there was a few different things that the doctors couldn't attribute as to why he healed the way he did, or even survived in general from his injuries and from the experience that he went through. So he also said he had a recent health scare, and big thing that he navigated, and prayer once again was something that, while he did do steps to navigate it through the medical system and different things, he really brought again prayer. That was what he asked for, and he swears that is what helped heal him and get him to the other side of it. So I found those things to be really just incredible. And then the one other piece I want to bring up too is dreams. That something he really struggled with, he said, for many years after, was when he would dream, he would dream of having his hands in how it was normal, all 10 fingers, what he was born with and had for the first 25 years. And that was really comforting, but also hard to wake up from, because he wanted to go back into the dreams and have that experience and feel like what he had felt his whole life to that point. It was such a big shift. And to have something that's so externally facing, you can't hide your hands, you can't do anything to cover your hands necessarily. So it's very visible, and he gets a lot of stares, curiosity, disgust sometimes, and he talks about that some too. And so in his dreams, at one point, all of a sudden, he started to dream with his hands now that they were after the accident. And when he talked to his psychiatrist, she said, "My work's done here. Your brain, your subconscious has now understood and come to peace. You've accepted on a deeper level your accident and who you are and what you look like, and that your dreams are reflective of that." And so I really wanted to share these few things, because I know you don't know his story yet, but I think it just speaks to the power and the incredibleness of him and the human mind and the body. I mean, truthfully, this story and his experience really is a testament to the power of our bodies to survive, to heal, to adapt. And I get goosebumps talking about this, because he is such a bright human soul, so kind, so open. And his mission really, and in why he wanted to come on and share, is to really help others, whether it's children or peers or anyone else who has either been born with a disfigurement, has been burned, has had an accident, to just note that there's always someone worse off, was his way and his mentality of feeling like he can get through it, and finding and being a voice to help others accept others with differences in physical appearance, abilities, disabilities, all the things. And I thought that was just incredible and inspiring and humbling experience and human to want to take this and say, how can I now help you? How can I answer your questions? How can I let you see that this is okay and we can be okay, and humans come in all varieties and shapes and forms, and we all go through challenging things. So I am going to leave us there and get you into this episode. Again, if you have any questions or any suggestions for Kyle, or you want to learn more, please reach out to me directly and I can connect Kyle to you and or the resources that you're sharing. But this just lights me up in the sense that we're building a community, y'all. You're here, I'm here, Kyle's here. I've been just floored and humbled by the growth of this podcast and the people who show up and listen and respond and connect. So keep doing it. Keep going, be kind. We are doing amazing things here in the world. And I appreciate you all showing up for yourself, being here, connecting in this way. So I'm going to kick it to Kyle Griffin and this episode and his story. Enjoy. Well, hello, Kyle. Welcome to the Live Wildly podcast.
Thank you.
I'm just so happy you're here and we're getting to do this in person. I don't get to often do these in person, so welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I have to give all the kudos to my husband, Steven, for connecting us. That your story is just so inspiring, wild, transformational, and I'm just delighted to have you. So this is a little bit different of, if you're a listener, you know I typically ask my guest, what's your story, what's your background? But today we're really talking about your story. That is the meat of our interview. And so I want to start by having you tell us about your childhood, background, who you were leading up to the event that really changed the trajectory of your life.
Sure. So I'm a Colorado native. I was born and raised here. Totally, my wife teases me, Brady Bunch upbringing. I have one sister, had a great experience in high school, just had a great life, and had just turned 25 when my accident happened. And so, yeah, obviously a lot changed after that.
Yeah, yes. So did you do sports? Where were you headed? Like, where were you in life at that time?
So I was in college. Mm-hmm. I had actually been in college up at CSU, and then took a semester off with the encouragement from my dad, which was ironic, and I moved up to Winter Park to be a ski bum.
Okay.
And so I had just moved back from Winter Park. What was supposed to be a semester turned into like 2.5 years. So I had just moved back and got a job at a restaurant waiting tables. And so at that point I was in college when it happened.
Okay. What was your mindset on life? How were you feeling? So you had just taken all this time off and the world was your oyster, or did you have an idea of what you wanted to do? No, I
was having fun.
Just having fun.
I was having fun. I was in college, so that was kind of my job.
Okay.
You know, that not only that, but it was to finish college. Mm-hmm. And so that was my mindset. I really had not thought a lot further out than that. That it wasn't at the point that I needed to start looking for a real job. You know, I was having fun. I was waiting tables. That's a fun job to have, mm-hmm. as you know, yes. Stephen. And my focus then was to finish school, and I didn't have a lot further out from that.
Okay. What was your degree in? What were you pursuing?
Degree in marketing.
Marketing. Okay. And just really setting us up, because we're going to go deep here. Did you believe in God or a higher power at this time? Did you have a connection?
I did. And I do. I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
So it was kind of just drilled into me. But no, definitely believed in God. And as the story unfolds, that you'll see it became a much deeper belief And again, when I tell this story, I fell back on all of that, my Catholic upbringing and everything, like the night of.
Okay. Very interesting. So I think we're ready. Why don't you lead us into this fateful day, set the scene for us. You said you had just returned, you were out at a bar.
Yep, we'd just gone downtown, so it was some friends of mine from the restaurant. And I was at home, had taken a sandwich home from the restaurant and had it, and I had absolutely no intention of going out that night. That I had actually talked to my mom, and she had said, what are you doing tonight? And I said, I really just want to stay in. I had no intention, had turned down a couple people. And so some of my friends talked me into going, and they said, we're going to go downtown, it'll be great. So I decided to go with them. And as I was leaving the house, and this ties in again later, as I was leaving the house, I was wearing like leather shoes, and I didn't like them. I'm very particular about things like that. So I went back in the house and changed my shoes into brown bucks. They're like brown suede shoes with an orange sole. They're kind of preppy shoes. And so that will, again, further into the story, have an impact. But so anyway, we went downtown and we were parked in this parking structure, a 6-story parking structure. And there was a walkway between a bridge between the parking structure and this loft building where they were doing construction. And so we were crossing the bridge, and there were uncovered power lines coming out of the transformer. And so I had my car keys in my right hand. And what happened was the electricity got close enough to the wire that the electricity arced from the wire to my index finger and came through, crossed over my chest, and exited out my left hand. And then it threw me off the bridge, and I fell, I think it was 2 stories down, and landed on a little, so this is over an alley downtown.
Okay.
And I landed on a little box window air conditioner sticking out of somebody's window, which I'm 6'3", so that took up basically from my neck to my stomach.
Yeah.
And so when I landed on that, when the electricity had gone through my chest, it stopped my heart. So had I just dropped right there, had it not thrown me, I would have been dead. And so luckily it did throw me. And so landed on this window air conditioner, fell 2 stories. And the force when I hit was great enough to restart my heart. But in hitting, I broke my neck at C2, C3, and C6. So it's 2 of the same places Christopher Reeve broke his neck, and then 1 below. So it broke my neck, but restarted my heart.
Oh my gosh.
And then to go back to the orange sole shoes, the brown bucks, they said had I not had those on, that the electricity would have gone down through my feet. Electricity looks for the shortest route out, and it just scatters once it's like going through your body. So it didn't go down to my feet. The shoes had grounded me. So it's like the equivalent from what I've been told is like having tires on a car if you get struck by lightning in a car. So being vain, I guess, sort of helped me that night because I went back in and changed my shoes. So that gave me a leg up. The rest was still terrible, but at least I didn't die right there.
Then what happened? So you've landed on the AC unit.
So I land on the AC unit, and then my friends that are with me, of course, are like, oh my God.
What
They
just
said
happened?
It literally looked like Scooby-Doo, like when they stick their finger in a socket and the blue outline goes around the character.
Yeah.
And they said that's exactly what it looked like. And then they said it just looked like an invisible hand reached in and flung me off the bridge and a ways down the alley, and then I just fell. And so my friend Tom that was with me, he happened to notice a paramedic driving by because we were 6 stories up, and he's looking down at an intersection, and he sees the paramedic truck just pulling up to a light. So, and this is what's been told to me. So he apparently raced down, got them. So there were people there immediately. And I think the fear being was if I, came to and tried to move, I was just precariously balanced on this air conditioner. So the fire department came, and they had issues too getting down the alley because the alley was apparently very narrow. And so they had to bring ladders into the alley to climb up and then put me in like the sled that you see skiers being pulled down in, and lowered me down. So fed me into the ambulance. My friends said, they asked and said, what hospital are you taking him to? And whoever was responding to them, I think it was one of the paramedics, said, we'll let you know where they take the body.
Wow.
meaning there was no chance that I was going to live. And he said, we're taking him to the hospital, but they'll let you know where they take the body.
Oh.
So that was what they got left with. Mm-hmm. And so from there, not probably the most incredible part of it, and I haven't shared this with a lot of people just because some of my friends, when I first told them, and I didn't really tell anybody, I had a couple of them that tried to poke holes like, well, wait. Because it was all, I died.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to tell it now because it is like the biggest part of the story. So I'm in the ambulance and I was completely aware of what was going on, but in hindsight, that it was all watching it sort of from above. And my perspective on everything that happened in the ambulance that night was, and I still can see it perfectly clear, the plastic, round dome plastic lights on the roof of an ambulance, that was kind of my perspective. And it was even kind of a yellowed plastic, older ambulance. And so watched all this unfold. And so the paramedics are working on me and the ambulance the hospital calls out to the ambulance and asks for the condition of, the patient when they're arriving. And they responded DOA, which is dead on arrival. And so it was definitely hurried, that and I remember they did, and I can't think what it is.
It's like epinephrine?
Yes, they're stopping my heart because my heart had stopped, I think a couple times.
Okay.
And so...
But you were aware, that's what you're saying. Like you heard them talking, you knew, were you watching yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
And it took me a while to figure that out because I was listening and I kind of felt like I was really in it, like in the ambulance. And then the whole perspective was from above. And so then I remember arriving at the hospital, nothing after that. And then the feeling that I got, it was, because I literally did leave the ambulance. I died. And it still sounds so weird to say that.
It gives me goosebumps to think about.
But it is. It's just such a...
Wow.
And I didn't have... Everybody always wants to know if you have like the white light experience, or you see loved ones or, something fantastic. And it was fantastic, I will say. But it wasn't anything like that. It wasn't a white light. It was a feeling, like an all-enveloping feeling that it was euphoria, total euphoria. That's the best way I can describe it. And when people talk about heaven, and I do believe it was heaven for sure, when they talk about it, everybody always jokes like pearly gates and all this stuff, but it isn't. It's a feeling, and it really is just euphoria. And when I came back, and then the next thing I knew, so I was waking up in a hallway or in the ER, and there's so much, and I really don't remember it. I was in for a second, and there's so much going on, and I was going into surgery, and I was pissed that I was back. That it was such an amazing feeling, and then come back into it, and it was my body, which was pretty messed up. And I was mad. I was really mad. And they were taking me to surgery and they were explaining. And they were trying to get a hold of, my mom and dad were there, and they were trying to get a hold of my sister. And I still think to this day is probably one of the reasons I'm alive, because I didn't get to say goodbye to her. And they kept saying, we're going into surgery. We got to do this, because they had to put halo on and then start addressing the burns because I was just burning from the inside out. And I kept saying, no, I want to wait. I got to say goodbye to Colette. And so went off to surgery and thinking, well, this is great. I'm going to go back. And went into surgery. Next morning, I forget when it is, but when I woke up and looked around and figured out what was going on. And again, I was so angry. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you dangle this carrot and, I get to feel this feeling.
Yeah.
And now I'm back. And it was just unbelievable. It really was. And my wife and I always say now, and I still am after that experience, that I truly can say I'm not afraid to die, because I know what it is, and it's awesome.
And I'm curious about that. When it happened in that moment, you were electrocuted and it stopped your heart, did you have pain? Were you aware of the pain? Or no,
pain,
it just
nothing.
it was there, and then you were gone and you had this feeling. And so it was just a feeling. And that's what's so interesting to me. Like, you knew and you were euphoric, but you were still tethered in some way.
Yes, that's a great description, because I knew I was tethered still. And it wasn't, again, the white light down there now looking back, but I knew I was tethered, but it was just sort of like floating in this like wonderful marshmallow, if you know, but it's just that euphoric feeling from the inside and just a wonderful feeling. I don't know, I need better descriptive words, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a feeling. Okay. And so then it turned to pain, probably and anger, right? And did you have that feeling again? Was it just one? I mean, yes, your heart stopped probably a couple of times. Correct. As they were working on you.
Yeah.
And
but never that feeling again.
Okay.
Because my heart did stop multiple times after that. I actually, everywhere I traveled in the hospital, they had paddles with me. But no, it was never that. The first time amazing experience.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, like you said, you don't have fear of death. Do you fear the pain of the possibility of pain, or just you?
You know, it's funny that you would say that too. I'm in pain every single day, that my hands hurt all the time. And they have since the accident. It's nerve pain. There's just so much nerve damage in them. And so the pain part doesn't really bother me as, you know, so much, just because I've become so accustomed to it.
Let's dive into more around, so you make it through the surgery and you're angry and you're here. And then how was that like? How long, what was that healing journey? I
used to pray. So I have joked with my mom in the past or since, but I used to pray. I mean, that's all I did was pray that I died. And I knew I couldn't take care of it. So I always hoped that in one of the surgeries that something happened, you know, like you always hear, like they leave a sponge in or they nicked something or something happened, because I was having surgeries like every single day.
Wow.
And I thought the odds are so much better that something could happen. And I prayed for that something happened. Didn't want anybody to get in trouble, like a doctor or a nurse, for being negligent or anything. I just wanted something to happen where I got to go back to where I had been.
Mm-hmm. Did you voice this with your doctors or anyone of that? This is harder. Like, I don't know how you would voice it, but
I don't think I did in the beginning so much, because everything was such a whirlwind and I really didn't have choices. I was going into surgeries that I had no idea.
Okay, they just, you know, this is what's next.
It was all things needed to save my life. And that was something too that they told my parents that night. They said, you know, if anybody wants to say goodbye, you need to get them up here right now.
Okay.
And I remember my mom saying too, because we've had recently a similar experience, but so it was just my mom and dad that night, you know, in the beginning. And my dad kept saying to my mom, you know, we got to call people and tell them. And she said, I just kept putting it off, saying, no, I don't want to. If I can put it off as long as I can, but as soon as we put the word out, then it's real.
Yes, it was this bubble that you were somewhat in. What was the experience from your friends? You know, looking at that, did that change their lives in some manner of having witnessed? And
oh, I'm sure. I know with one of them for sure.
Okay.
You know, and it's funny that I'm not in contact with them anymore, and I haven't been in years. And no particular reason. I've just fallen out of contact with them. You know, it's funny. I've wondered how it has affected them. You know, even like now, because obviously it's still affecting me now in a positive way. We're doing this.
Yes.
But I don't know how it really has affected them.
Mm-hmm. Did they come see you right after? Did they find out where you were
yes,
and make sure you were okay?
Yeah, and that was the wonderful part, is the nurses at one point had to talk to my parents and say, you have to get rid of some of these people. There's too many people up here. Mm-hmm. And so that was awesome. But yes, they were up there all the time.
Okay. Can you speak to some of the surgeries or really what you had to undergo, if you're open to sharing? You are so positive now, but as you're saying, like, you're still in pain, and through that you were feeling so much anger, and I can only imagine you were just this young, bright-eyed, having fun kid.
Just turned 25.
Just turned 25. Life is your oyster, to hospital beds, surgeries every day, epic pain, a body that you probably doesn't feel like yours. Can you share a little bit around that?
So I had surgeries, at least one surgery every day for a month and a half. And the pain it was just overwhelming. And it was burns. So like I said, I was burning from the inside out. So my hands and my forearms were just enormous, because it was like, I was equated to like Jiffy Pop popcorn. I was kind of cooking from the inside out. And so it was debridement for the burns. And so my arms were literally just wide open. You could see all the inner workings of your arm, everything. And so the first effort was to get all of that closed up, to keep it healthy and living, because if not, they were going to amputate both hands. And that's to back up. That's a very important part of the story too. When I was in the emergency room that night, there was like young Doogie Howser, young doctor, and old school burn doctor. And they apparently got into a big fight over what my care path was supposed to be. And young doctor, my current doctor, he fought for me because the other doctor was just going to amputate at the wrist because I was paralyzed from the neck down. And he didn't see a great use to try to save it because it was so bad. And so he was just going to amputate and like call it good and then deal with it from here up. So a young doctor fought for me. And that's why I had so many surgeries in the beginning, was because he took it so slowly, and he would amputate as little as he had to each time going back, because like my index finger was just black. It just looked like ash if you touched it. So that was immediately amputated. And then he wanted to go as slow as he could on my left hand and in cutting it back. And so that's why he took it so slow and tried to save as much as he could of everything, as the alternative was to cut off both hands. Mm-hmm. So that was key, that I had him as my doctor. So that then explains why there were so many surgeries, because he was just methodically putting me back together again. And that's how he worked, that he, they were going to amputate the thumb on my right hand, and he said, no, let's wait. And he waited like a year and just let it hang there till he came up with something that he thought would work. And he did. He made this mechanical hand. And I just had the description, someone else actually gave it to me, but to describe my right hand, there's so many surgeries that it's put together with a pulley and tendons taken from other parts of my body and put in this hand. So this is basically like, this guy explained it perfectly, a prosthetic hand that's covered in my own skin.
Wow.
And so I don't have any feeling in my right hand, and have had, again, tons of surgeries for that, nerve grafts. One of the coolest surgeries, I guess, was him making, well, two. So to go back, there's one that they did. So my forearms and wrists were just burnt, and they couldn't get any of the skin grafts to take. So what they did, it's called a skin flap surgery. And they open up like pockets in my groin, and they put my hands inside my body.
Wow.
And sewed it up and let me grow to myself to get that's the best possible skin graft they could get. So I think it was 32 days that I was sewn to myself, and to get the skin to grow back. And I mean, it was all humbling, but those I think were the most humbling days of all, because I mean, I couldn't otherwise but do anything for myself.
What a journey. So, and also you said you broke your neck and you were paralyzed, and today you were walking and you were upright. What happened with that?
They have absolutely no medical explanation. That they told my family when they got there, and they told me. And I'll never forget that too. This woman came in and sat down and explained to me, and she said, do you understand what's happened? And that, you're going to be paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of your life. And they have absolutely no medical explanation why it came back.
How long did it take?
It wasn't really long before they knew, because they would come in and like scrape my feet and do, the test to see if you could feel it. And it wasn't a really long time. I forget, again, because the beginning was such a blur, I forget. But it wasn't a real long time before we had figured out that my leg, everything still worked. And it was a long time before I actually did walk, but that wasn't a result of my broken neck. That was just a result of being terribly broken and in a bed, that attached to a wall of machinery. So I just couldn't get out of bed. And so I forget when the first time I walked was, but I remember I had in my head, because there was quite a few people up at the hospital, my friends and family, that had kind of come up to watch, I guess. But just they knew I was going to walk that day, that it was like on the schedule. We had been working up to it with PT and stuff. And I remember in my head, like my theme song in my head that was playing was the music from Chariots of Fire, because it just felt like that big of a deal. And I'm literally like dragging my feet down this hallway. I weighed like 120 pounds. And so that was my first walking. But the surgeries were just insane, that they were just constant. And the pain was incredible. When they would come in for the debridement, that these burns are wide open, and they would take wire metal brushes and clean them out. And it was just, I think 3 or 4 times. Well, I passed out from the pain.
Yeah.
And they would give me as much as they could for the pain. And then they would do part of it too, like in a hot tub, and lower me in the water and let everything get moist and then scrape it. But every day that was
How long was your overall, that initial and stay in the hospital and PT? How long were you there till you...
I was in the hospital for 67 days. And so almost a little over 3 months. And then the process after that was years afterwards. And I remember that question being asked too of, okay, so when are you thinking I can go home? And at that point, when I do, how long before my life goes back to normal? And they said, oh, I mean, it won't even be close to normal for a year. And I remember my parents and I looked at each other like, what? You know, we thought it would be like a couple weeks. This would be, I mean, we knew realistically that wasn't it because there was so much damage, but we just had no idea of like the long-term gravity of what had happened.
Mm-hmm. Your mental state was ready. You were like, let's get out of here. I've made strides. I'm not dead. I am here. Let me just go. I want to be a kid again. And so as you faced anger, and I can imagine like loneliness and those hard emotions that challenged you during this time, what helped you stay strong? And or at what point, I can only imagine if you can share that experience of what it felt like to go through those challenges a little bit more. And then when did you get to a place where you felt life is worth living? You no longer prayed, take me, I'm done with this. How long and what was that journey like?
It was years, and a lot of therapy. That I had a psychiatrist or a psychologist that was from the burn unit that met with me as soon as I was coherent enough to speak with her. And if it hadn't been for her, let me lump it into a group. Her, most importantly, my family, you said what got me through, was my family and friends. I just had an overwhelming amount of support, which was wonderful, but through that whole thing. And I really wasn't angry at all. I just wanted to be dead. I just hoped for the mistake. And that's all I really was kind of focused on, is figuring out how it was going to play out that I ended up not being here. And even jokingly with my PT one day, because there was, and I always say this and I mean it, there's always somebody worse off than you are. So even in the midst of my worst nightmare, there was another kid that was in the burn unit that was miles ahead of me with what had happened to him. And it was half jokingly, half not. I just had a really cool PT, and she was closer to my age because she had just graduated from school. And I talked about it with her one day. I'm like, I don't even know how, if I wanted to kill myself, how I would do it right now, because my hands don't work. So, and she had a great sense of humor, and it's probably not the first time she'd experienced it, but she played along. And I'm like, well, I could throw myself in front of a train, but I'd have to get somebody to bring me there right now because I can't walk, and just went through all these things. And it was kind of funny, but it really wasn't. In the back of my mind, that's all I thought about was, how is this going to end?
Mm-hmm. So that deep pain really settled with you, both physical pain, but that feeling of death. And you weren't, like you said, you weren't afraid. You weren't afraid to go in front of a train. I wanted it back. You just wanted that death experience. You were ready.
I wanted to go back to that place I visited the first night. That was my whole goal.
Yes. Do you have more you want to share around the story of that experience before I take you deeper into some other pieces? Because I think it's so, to your point of, there's always someone worse off. While that's kind of a morbid way to think, you were at that state, and that's a complete reality of... And
it is a morbid thing to think, but it does, and it did, and it still does. Again, I feel weird saying that, but it does get me through. That, and I hope for people that everyone will do that. I mean, people think, oh, that's terrible that I'm thinking this, but it's not. It's human nature to know. You feel like you're at your worst right now with whatever you're going through, physical, mental, whatever. But you can always find somebody who is worse off. And that's why I went back to the burn group. I was part of this burn support group. And you would go and see, I'm feeling like this is the end of the world. Look at me. I'm totally disfigured. There's nothing I can do to go out in public. The two worst burns are hands and face, because the two things you can't cover up. And then I would go to this burn group and see these people that were just horribly, horribly burned over 100% of their body. And it, I guess, kind of put it in perspective that I could leave feeling better. And again, I don't feel bad for saying that now, but it does sound warped. That you find someone worse off, but it's human nature. It makes you feel better. And so that was a big part of it, is that when, as dark as things got, you saw somebody worse off. And
And can you talk a little bit about that support group or how was it to get through this time? You said it took years. And so family was supportive, this burn group was supportive, but what did it teach you really about the nature of the human body? I mean, you wanted to die. You did die multiple times, and yet your body survived and you were here.
That became a lot of pressure, what you just said exactly.
Yeah.
Because so many people said that, they're like, you survived all of this and the aftermath and the things that went wrong in the aftermath of it. And you survived. You've got this greater duty. What are you going to do? And that honestly became so much pressure that from people saying it, and then it became my internal pressure of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, I've got to do something great and amazing and change the world because I've been given this, second and third chance. And that was a lot of pressure because I didn't have the answers. Mm-hmm. Still don't.
I think that's very humbling. I think your story is something that I could see. I'm assuming it was in the papers and it would no?
It's funny. Quiet? People have asked that, and I don't think it was.
No.
That somebody thought they saw an article, and to be honest, I don't think it was ever that public.
Okay. So that's really interesting because it feels like it is one of those, like you said, like you're going to go on Oprah and you're going to tell your story.
Exactly.
And what's my path now?
Right.
Did that make it, so you said it made it more of a burden, but harder to distinguish and move forward as well in your life? Because now not only did you survive, but now there's this expectations of almost all eyes are now turned on you to say, where are you going? How did you take the next steps in your life? What was your mindset like now after? So maybe after you've gotten through PT enough, your life is starting to come back together where it's not surgeries, it's not just the day-to-day survival. Where did you go from there?
From there, I went back to college, but I couldn't work. And so I went back to school. I went down to Metro. And it's funny, when I was at CSU, I got terrible grades. I just had a really good time in college, and studying wasn't my first priority at all. And so when I went back to school downtown, I got really good grades. It was a totally different perspective. I don't want to say I was serious. I was like, very serious about life, but it was just everything at that point was such little steps that even then, that nothing was, in my head, I couldn't plan any further out than the next semester, or that it was still so overwhelming. And when I went back to school, I went back way too soon because I was so eager to get my life back together, and I just wanted to be normal, and I wanted to do normal things and all the things that I did before. And it was hard. It was very hard because I couldn't, my hands were still in bandages. And I couldn't zip and unzip my own zipper, so I couldn't do my own pants to go to the bathroom. And I had the therapist work with me, and I had this fishing line at the top of my zipper that I could feed my hand through, and it was very complicated. And there was a couple situations where I couldn't take care of myself, that I couldn't get my pants done again. And I was in a classroom, and everybody filed out of the classroom, and I was slowly getting my stuff together, and the door shut and locked, and I was locked in the classroom because I couldn't get out. Because I wasn't locked in there, I couldn't get out. Yeah. That my hands I couldn't work the doorknob to get out. So I had to wait until the next class, which I was like, God, there may not be a class in here until like 6 o'clock tonight. Mm-hmm. And so I pushed it to go back. And I'm glad I did. And I pushed it too with driving, that I couldn't drive a car, and because I couldn't put the key in and start it, and I couldn't, and so I essentially stole my car back one day. I went out, and my PT had made this big lumpy thing to put on the key so I could kind of turn it. And so I was really chomping at the bit to get stuff back to normal. And so, school was then my focus, that those were the baby steps that I took, because beyond that, I wasn't sure what my life looked like, because I was still so dependent on other people. And I didn't know what it looked like when that was over, if I would ever live by myself or drive, and those were the questions like at night that ran through my head constantly were, well, what if I'm never going to be able to do that again? Well, I'm never going to be able to do that again. And the big one was, I'm never going to be able to wear a wedding ring, and all the things that ran through. And I took it as far out in my head as someday when I have kids, I'm going to be at their back to school night, and I'm going to be a huge embarrassment to them because I'm going to walk in their classroom, and I'm going to be that dad that has the weird hands, and they're going to be embarrassed of me. And I took it out to everything because I did get stared at a lot. Everywhere we went, I got stared at. And that, and that's my personality anyway, but yeah, I took it miles and miles out. All realistic things, but that's where we had to back it down to the smaller steps, because looking that far out was just overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can only imagine. But it, especially when it's both, it really affected how you feel, but then physicality, which is all our society is around. How do you look? How do you show up? How are you going to provide for a family and provide? And so I can only imagine that was really hard and to just navigate. I think school probably gave you a good container, maybe.
That's perfectly said. Yep.
Yes, to say, I don't need to know that, I know this, and let me just stay here. But did you feel scared ever? Did you ever, going back to when all this happened, you never expressed fear? That's not something that you've said yet. Was that ever?
It's funny. I have to say, I didn't express fear, because the unknown was known to me, which is what I wanted to go back to. And really, it was like 90% pain. It really was, that there was just so much pain. And there was anger. You go through the phases, but anger too was really never a huge one of the emotions that I stuck on. And going back to the burn group, I always saw, and we talked about it, seeing the people in the burn group. There was a couple guys and they were very badly burned, but that just the world owed them something. They were mad at the world, they were bitter, and that their lives would never be the same because they were living in this horribly angry place. And there were times that I got angry for sure. There was a couple times in the hospital that I just totally lost it and exploded on people. And but overall, anger was never a huge emotion, like it was for other people. And then I was told too by my psychiatrist, she said, people, before they have something catastrophic like this happen, if they're normal and well-adjusted before, chances are good you're going to come out the other end different, but still normal and well-adjusted. And that people that have something like that happen going into it that aren't well-adjusted, they're the ones in the burn group that are angry and the world owes them something. And so she always said, I had good hope for you that you were going to come out the other end okay, because you came into it okay.
That mindset, you were really grounded and positive, and just...
And my family and friends, again, all of it. The support was just overwhelming.
That's beautiful, and I think it speaks to the nature of humanity. And I can imagine, if you were all alone, or your friends, didn't show up again, or your parents couldn't get there or spend time with you, that your outcome probably would have been a little bit different. And so as you took this journey, and now seeing where you are in positive, and just, you would never know any of this was your story. When and how did you find positivity, like true space? And maybe, I don't want to say you don't have these feelings of like, I'm ready to die if your pain is that bad now still, but when did that start to lift, or you started to feel that there was hope or the possibility of the life that you thought you could have, and actually navigating and getting married? I think
that it all started falling into place like that when, going back to school was the first step, and that it was just something to do. It was rejoining society. And then just the slow baby steps of getting back into everyday things, and which was happening way too slow for me. And so I decided at one point and I had just learned how to drive again, where I could hold on to the steering wheel, and it was, logistics of, can he physically do this? And my grandparents had a house up in Winter Park and loved to go up there. We grew up there. And so I said, because, I had to move back with my parents. So I was living on my own, had to move back in with them. And they literally had to do everything for me. It was like bringing a child home from the hospital, that I had just learned to walk again, and they had to do everything for me, I was relearning everything. I actually had one of those little books for children, those soft books with the tie my shoe and button my button. That was my physical therapy. And so I said, I'm going up to the cabin, and not sure how this is going to turn out, but I'm going up to the cabin and I'm going to be by myself. And I had all the time in the world. And so I went up there, and it was the most horribly frustrating time ever. Because there was so much that I couldn't do. I couldn't even get the key in the door when I got there, that I couldn't get the house unlocked. And so I had to go next door, and I asked this lady, our neighbor, to come over and open the door for me, because I said, please don't tell my parents, because they'll never let me go back again. And I just navigated it very slowly. And, I couldn't use a knife. I used my mouth for a lot to rip packages open and do stuff. But I had to learn how to do it for myself. And I think that was my big milestone for me, that once I did that I kind of knew things were going to be okay. I knew they were going to be terribly different, but that it was looking more normal, that things were getting more normalized.
That makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. How do you feel looking back at it now when you reflect? It was your life experience, and I say that because sometimes I can look back and be like, did I really live that? That was so wild. Or, wow, that doesn't even seem like that was me, but I know I lived it. How do you feel now, being where you are, settled in the ways you are, and having the wisdom that you've had of living a life and having gone through that? I'm just curious what it makes you think.
If I had to change anything at this point in my life, had you asked me 3 years out, 5 years out, sure, I would have always said, yes. If I could change one thing, I would go back to that day, April 9th, and change everything about it. But now, and with the wisdom of seeing the past and what's happened, I honestly would not change a thing. I wouldn't. The pain was overwhelming. Just unbelievable. The years, the surgeries, all of it, the stairs, your whole life just turning into something completely different than you had expected. And I really wouldn't change a thing, because everything that has happened, and I truly believe that everything happens for a reason, I do. And I think that everything that has happened has led me to where I am today, literally sitting here with you. I don't know if my wife and I would be together if everything hadn't played out the way that it did. I just mean things falling into place, the world, and crazy things happen, and doors open, sliding doors sort of thing. And I wouldn't want my life to be any different than it is right now. I can't imagine my life any different right now without Kim. Kim is just my whole world. She is my reason for living. And if any of those steps had changed along the way and it didn't end up this way, it wouldn't be worth it.
That makes sense. So can you build on that just a little bit more? I'm sure this changed your thoughts of just life, and what are your thoughts on fate and destiny? I know you just said you think everything happens for a reason, but do you think it was simply a freak accident, or this was just meant to be your path and that's what set you off?
I think there was a reason for it happening. And like I said, I think it was, I don't think you necessarily have a predestined path, because there's too many factors that are involved for that. But I think there's some kind of plan, I guess. And I don't know if mine went terribly wrong or if it went exactly the way that it was supposed to. But I'm perfectly happy with the end result right now.
That's wonderful. And did it change your perspective of God, higher power, your Catholic upbringing, connection? So this is the part I was going to go back to. So the night of the accident, when I was in the ambulance, like all my old Catholic school came back, and I wasn't, and it, again, remind me about paramedics too. So I'm in the ambulance and I wasn't speaking, but in my head, I was going through the Hail Mary, like rapid fire, and remembered all of it. Wow.
And so that's what I went back to, because I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. And so I was praying the Hail Mary, and my grandma Reagan, who I was very close with, had passed away, and she was very religious, very deep faith. And I was praying to her, and I kept saying, Grandma, I'm not ready. I don't want to do this. This is really bad. I know it's really bad. And again, I wasn't saying any of this out loud. This is all in my head. So yes, I fell back on the old school Catholic. And so then as I was healing and going through, when I was in the hospital, really it was such a blur of things that, the only thing I prayed for was to die, that I just didn't want to be there. But then afterwards, I went into this phase where I was the nicest person in the world. And my sister and I we're very close, and we would rail on people. Somebody walked by, you're fair game. We're going to make fun of you. Oh my God, look at her. Like, just totally tear on people. That's what we did. And it was our fun, joking thing. So I was saying something. I'm like, well, you never know. And, being all touchy-feely and nice. And I'm like, well, no, Colette, we really need to be kind. And she just snapped and she goes, you know what? I want my brother back. This guy, no, he's not a lot of fun. I know some bad stuff happened to you and everything, but I need my brother back. I need the one who's going to jump in and blah, blah, blah. And so that kind of put it in perspective for me that it wasn't me. That wasn't truly me. And I'm a very nice person, I'm not saying that,
no,
but it wasn't that extreme. And I felt like I maybe needed to be kinder, and that was a turning point too, because then I was like, no, I do have to be myself again.
Oh, yeah. Finding that perspective. I'm sure. Did you feel like a completely different person going through all of this?
Completely different person. I didn't know where I fit in. I mean, like in my family and stuff, yes, but I mean, I looked so different, and I just imagined all the slots in life that I would never fit into again. Or that nobody, and the things that, really meant the most to me, like no girl is ever going to want to hold my hand. And the wedding ring was a big deal for some reason to me. And for Kim, my wife, when she, I was all worried about it, and she's like, well, it's very simple. Well, wear it on the other hand. You have fingers on that hand, no big deal.
Just say you're European.
Exactly.
No one will question
it. Exactly.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you said to remind you of the paramedics, too, before we move on.
So they came up. So they, again, I was pronounced DOA. And so they said, goodbye at the door, basically. And they said, we knew that you weren't going to make it. And then when we heard that you made it, they came up to my room to see me. And sort of like, we have to see it to believe it, because there's no way this kid with everything that was against him lived. There's just no way. So I remember the day they came up to my room and they walked in, and I remembered them. And so they said, man, we heard, this is amazing, and blah, blah, blah. And I explained everything back to them, what had happened. And one of the guys said, there's no way that you could know any of that. You were unconscious the entire time. You never came to once. Wow. But I told them the story of what happened.
And so you probably changed a lot of people's minds of reality and what it is. And so few of us will ever have that experience, thankfully, in a way,
right,
to die and come back. And yeah, I think I would ask you a billion questions. Is there any more when you think back to, so I know you described it as a feeling, and just, yeah, when you look at that, have you had any connections outside of that as an intuitive, past loved ones, anything like that?
No, it's funny you say that, because I really wanted that. Yeah. I thought having gone through this, because I've always been a believer in that. I've always wanted to see ghosts and spirits, and I totally believe in all of that. And I thought, well, this is going to open a door. This is awesome. And it never did. And I kept hoping, and I had hoped before that to see ghosts and all of that. But I really did think that would change it. And it didn't, it was a one-time experience.
Did it deepen your connection to God, to your religion, to your practices?
It did at the time, and I'll say now, I have a very deep faith, but am not religious, if that makes sense.
1,000%, yes.
So we don't attend church. I went through a phase afterwards where I wanted to, because it felt kind of like the right thing to do, like I owed God a big one. And I always looked at it that my grandma was up there, and that she went up to God and like tugged on his robe and said, hey, do you see that guy down there? That's my grandson. Could you make this one good, let him live a little bit longer? That's always how I had it in my head. And I really kind of believe that is what happened. And so it in waves it did, and I think it was changed in waves as I was healing, that if I needed it at the time, that I would fall back on it heavier, and then at times I didn't so much. But so I guess for a blanket answer, it's to have a very deep faith, and yes, very deep faith and full belief in God, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today. Mm-hmm. Him and my grandma. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today.
Yes, but you're looking forward, I guess, to when you return to that space and when you pass, or how do you feel now?
No, I am, very much. I would never want to leave here early, but when my time comes, I'm not afraid. And that's something that I can say that is good that has come out of this, because I've shared that with people who have lost someone and could explain to them, they're questioning, where are they, and where do they go? People that don't have faith, which luckily I was raised with faith, and that is a wonderful thing to fall back on. And the people that don't have it wonder, where are they? Where did they go? And I know for a fact I've helped a couple people that have really struggled with where their loved ones were, knowing that this place beyond, that it's just amazing. and that I've explained it and said, don't be afraid for them. But they're looking down here now saying, man, you guys are missing out. This place rocks.
That's really nice to hear and gives a lot of comfort. I'm curious too, so you have felt that bliss, that euphoria. Did you search for that after? Did you, like for me, I would have been like, will alcohol take me there? Will this take me here? Will this roller coaster, make me feel? Did you ever feel like you needed to search or try to reach for that? If you weren't going to die, how do you feel it in this physical plane, or that wasn't your path?
No, it wasn't my path at all. No, I never felt like that. It would, like I said, it just was a one time,
You'll just have that memory, that knowing,
and I do. And
knowing.
then the memory, again, it's definitely a memory, but it's a feeling. And I make this motion, like a self hug, that just all over in like I don't know if it's like a magnetic light. It's not even a light. It was just a feeling. That's all I can describe it. Because there was no light. It was just this overwhelming feeling. And I remember it was in my jaw and neck that you just feel like, oh, kind of like a baby in a womb almost, that it's that feeling of tightness, curled up. I guess that's a good description, kind of like a baby in a womb.
Yeah, just fully held, fully warm, safe,
Yep.
all those things that you got to feel. It gives me hope that, yes, this is our experience, and then there's so much more on that other side. We don't just, if anything, we can take that. We know you don't just stop living.
Right.
Your soul, whatever it is, moves forward. And so what do you think is the most important advice you could give to someone just around the journey of life? Having this perspective is so unique and not one most of us will ever have.
Best piece of advice. I guess it would be that, bad things happen to everybody, and that no matter what it is, it will get better, and it'll get different and better than where you are. That it'll never be the same. My life will never be what it was before. My life, leaving the house every day, my life is never the same like it was before because my hands are so different. I look different. My day-to-day is different because I look different. But things will get so much better than at your darkest point, and that it's just different. It's a new normal. That when at the lowest point, when you think this is it, that time does change a lot. And that gets said a lot with death, but time does heal a lot.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Do you have any other advice for someone who has had a near-death experience, a traumatic event? I know it will get better, but and I look back at your story and I'm like, what got you through? And you were like, well, I was just trying to be done here. That's what got you through. But do you have any advice for those who are struggling, who might have a traumatic event or an illness? What would you offer to them? You just gave us an amazing word of wisdom, but anyone specifically going through something really, really hard?
And I went back to the hospital a couple times. I was asked back to talk to patients that were in kind of similar circumstances. And it's so hard to convince them that things will be okay. It will be a whole new different, but I think that's it. At the time, nobody wants to hear it either. Mm-hmm. But that with really like that, with no matter what you're going through, things will get better. And, it's such a cliche birthday card kind of thing, like hang in there, the cat hanging onto the branch. Yeah. But there's a lot to be said for it, that it's a lot of work and a lot of hell that you go through. But you will come out the other side in a different version of yourself, but that you will get there. Mm-hmm. That, time really does heal a lot. I guess that's it. That, as bad as you think it is right now, in a month, it's going to be a little bit better than it was today. And in a month from there, it's going to get a little bit different. And I used to look at it that I woke up and fell asleep every day. The last thing I thought about was my hands. And the first thing in the morning I woke up and I'm like, oh my God, I've been through this. That was years and years and years. And that gets different. You realize, wow, I just went 20 minutes and I hadn't thought about it. And I just went, and that turns into days. And, that it does get better.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Thank you for sharing that. And as you look forward now, what are a few of your goals, or what do you hope to see for yourself, having come through that, lived this wonderful life, have more to live? Do you have anything that, it's pushed you to be courageous around, or have you made a bucket list or anything like that of, time is short, but time is long? What do you want to do?
For us right now, it's travel. that we're at that stage in our lives where, and we had a couple other health scares over the years and one kind of recently, and we decided, you know what, it is just a reminder that life is short and we want to travel and see the world. And we have two, we call them our grandbabies, that our nieces and nephews are our children. We just have always felt like that with them. And they each just had a son. And so that's a huge focus for us.
Oh, fun.
Is
Family.
them in our lives. Yeah, they're our little grandbabies. And so they're a huge focus for us. So
I love that. And travel and family, I think
so a new generation of family is really the focus.
Yeah.
That we have this whole new set of little minds and little bodies coming into the world that we get to help be a part of.
That's really beautiful and wonderful. Yay for babies. And okay, so before I lead us into Wild Heart questions to close, is there anything more you want to share around your story or anything while we have this space?
One of the things, which is exactly what we're doing, so much pain was involved in my accident, but the good that comes out of it, which there was so much good, and that's meeting people and doing exactly what we're doing here today, sitting here. And it's these experiences that I can look back and say, wow, this was even more worth it because of this. And the people that I've talked to and reached out to, and I've been a show and tell at the hospital, and any time that I get an opportunity like that to do this, and one person hears and says, wow, that was a crazy story, but he seems fairly normal. And at the other end of it, that's good. That's why part of this happened.
Yeah, the impact, the sharing, the storytelling. I think we need more of it. I think we need more reminders that life is so sucky at times and the worst thing and so challenging. And you still have challenges. And it's not to say it's going to forever end, but there is so much beauty and worthiness in the paths that we have individually, and we don't get to choose it typically, right? You did not choose that by any means, but you lived it and you persevered. And I think that it just tells so much of the human body and what we're capable of, and just community. I'm so appreciative of you taking this time, not knowing me, but wanting to share and being open to share and helping others through this, because it's so inspiring and transformational to just be witness of. I'm floored by how far you've come and just what you experience. I mean,
I am too sometimes still.
You should be. I think you should be just so amazed at everything you've accomplished. If I can reflect that back at you, of just,
I am amazed and so grateful that, which is ironic that I would be saying that at any point in myself back then, that I would say that. But I'm very grateful for my life and the path that it's taken and where I ended up.
The acceptance of it all.
Yeah.
You can definitely tell you found acceptance and whatever healing is in that, at least. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I have 3 more questions for you, and then we will close this out. The first one is, how do you live wildly? And I think you touched a little bit on this with your travels and your grandbabies, but is there anything else that you would want to share?
To be honest, we just live a very quiet, boring life. There's nothing wild. We do as much as we can to help people when we can. And yeah, I have to say the next generation is that's our wild right now, that we want to be part of that.
That's beautiful. I think that's where a lot of our sites should be, is how do we leave the worlds better and how do we help them grow and be balanced and whole humans and strong enough to face, if something like what happened to you happens to them, to just know you're there and the support in the community. And
well, if they ever think about it and look back and think, wow, Uncle Kyle looked really different his whole life, that if something, God forbid, happens to them, whatever, but challenges that they get thrown at their life, maybe they will, maybe they won't, but they might reflect and go, wow, well, if Uncle Kyle could do it, I could do it.
Yeah, that they'll have this
Hopefully
story.
that they have that, maybe have learned something from me.
The mentality. Oh, for sure. They definitely will. I think knowing they'll want to share, if they were my kids, would want to go share this story everywhere. And my daughter, when I told them where I was going tonight, she's like, I want to listen. You have to tell me as soon as you get home. So I think, like I said, it's capturing your story and who you are is captivating. So that's how you live wildly, is through this, I think, and sharing that and through your day to day. That's wonderful. That's all you need to do. All of us live wildly differently. The second question would be, who or what currently inspires you?
That is a very hard question. Again, I'm going to have to fall back on our next generation, the babies in our family, because that really is like, it was just this whole fresh wave that came into our family that with the next generation, and that's so much fun to just be totally focused on them. It really does give us, I love it.
Yeah, no, I can feel that you love it. That's amazing. That's so exciting. And this one is probably you're gonna feel similar. The last one I have is, what is one thing you think could change the world and make it and its beings happier, whole, and healthier?
I think what we've kind of touched on through talking today is that the human nature and people just being kind to each other, that the world has taken such a different spin for many, many different reasons. But if everybody would remember that we are all in this together, and that I can tell my story and everybody goes, oh, that's terrible. Everybody has a story, and everybody needs to remember that. And have my thinking is, you always need to look at people, road rage, you get angry in traffic, and you never know what that person is going through. They might have just left the hospital with tragic. You just don't have any idea. So I guess if just, be kind to people, be nice. It's human nature. Just if, we all look out for each other, the world will be a better place.
I love that. Thank you. Be kind. That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Kyle, for coming on, for sharing your story.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I appreciate all the time, and am excited to hear how people feel when they hear your story. So
I am too. Very excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Live Wildly podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. It goes a long way to helping gain new listeners and fills my heart to see your reviews every time it comes through. It just keeps me inspired and going on this journey. And if you'd like to learn more or follow Olivia further, you can check me out at www.olivia-ashley.com. And there's a lot there that you can check out, and you can learn more about the podcast episodes. You can also follow along on Instagram at WildlyOlivia or at Live Wildly Podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate all of you listeners, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again.